high-tech fluid textures are basically mixations of textures that use the Unreal Engine's texture system, and particularly its generation of animated textures, in order to make all kinds of variations of visual effects with flat surfaces. Okay, what you're going to want to do is start out with a small room or your map, whatever you're making, or whatever you have. And what we're going to do is make a new texture in my level. I'm assuming that you're going to have a 256 by 256. That's the maximum you can have. You cannot have, unfortunately, 5112 by 5112. So you can't necessarily have these high detail, high resolution textures, but it's enough for an effect. So create an ice texture and extend the ice layer. Now, for your source texture, what this is going to be is the base texture that you're going to warp. So let's use this. Now, by the way, this is from the Our Kraden texture pack, which I will put these links and all this information in the tutorial, the full tutorial, in the link below. But let's go back to my level. This was resized to 256 by 256 with Photoshop, so you're probably going to have to do that. We start with a base texture. Now we use this glass texture property to effectively superimpose another texture, a bump map, and use that bump map to warp this texture in a superimposed and repetitive manner. It always has a pattern, and intuitively you could wonder that it's probably the case that there's a sinusoidal function that's making the oscillation. It's going through some rate in order to oscillate around the texture and give it that the warp, the changes that are applied to the ice texture. This is with respect to certain panning styles. Certainly linear is, and also to the actual visualization, so regardless of the panning style. Anyway, by the way, also, this is something I read off of Unreal SP a very long time ago, like 7 years ago, by Mr. Prophet, I believe. So this is, let's start with this texture. Now, it's a somewhat detailed but blurry bump map. Effectively, what you're going to want to do essentially is use a grayscale seamless texture to superimpose onto your current texture. And by the way, you will not be able to use any seamless, symmetrical, infinitely tiling textures like anything from like Sky City that infinitely tiles, because it's designed that way. Something like this, you will not be able to warp this. We have to have something that has asymmetry within the bounds of the boundary. So we go to our my level again, and let's this is a more blurred version of this, and this is a texture I believe that you can get from Unreal SP. Let's start with this, and you'll notice that it immediately warps the texture under it. Effectively, it's using the depth, which is the differences in the grayscale, to sort of add a depth to the texture itself. That's effectively what it's doing. And if you work with 3D modeling, you'll know that the bump map can be of that kind of use. So let's select a more blurry texture. you'll notice that if it's a lot softer, the effect is a lot more moderate. So if you have a very grainy texture, you're going to want a softer bump map. If you have a very soft texture with little graininess, like a base texture of some sort, then you'll probably do better with grainy bump maps, though not so grainy. You wouldn't want something like this, very pixelated and sharp bump map. It will tear up your base texture. So something like this. Now let's change the values here a little bit, and let's increase the amplitude, make it look a little bit I guess more convincing. Now you can just sort of play with this and find a point at which you feel comfortable putting this on a surface. So maybe something that has a lower amplitude, or whatever you wish. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this here. So if you select your real-time preview, you can see that it's wavy, but it'd be really weird if a player, of course, just kind of barges in here and sees like a wavy surface. What we're going to do is get a water texture. You can use something from XBPFX probably. There are a few it also depends on what kind of appearance of the fluid you're dealing with has. So maybe, and also mind your color palette of the lighting, because that also can affect the water, the fluid, the result of its appearance. We're using something from Zenith, so we're going to just make a water surface here. Okay, and let's rebuild. So you'll see that effectively what this looks like to me, the textures in combination with the color of the lighting and everything, is sort of like a muddy clay water pit, right? But let's just look at it with different textures just to see the impact of this ice texture. So you can see that's actually a very convincing difference, right? So if you add this, maybe you want a little bit more, a stronger frequency. It's a lot more convincing to just, a flat surface. It does give it a little bit of depth. What else can we do with these kinds of textures? Well, okay, so let's say we can do some other things here. And let's say we open something like this, map from Zenith, and let's go over here. So here's something you can do. You'll notice that this is not from the Chizuru texture pack, and the reason why is because it has a unique property. Now you'll notice that here it doesn't show. In fact, let's see if it actually even shows it in Direct 3D. Okay, so it does do that in Direct 3D. You'll notice that it has a particularly interesting reflection effect, but it's not reflecting on anything per se, or rather, there's no mechanism by which this actually happens. So it has to be the texture itself. So if we go to the texture itself, you'll notice a few things. First off, you'll notice that we have this bump map, okay? And we make it a wet texture, okay? And then we add the macro texture here. So this has the macro texture of this bump map. which is turned into a wet texture. So it has like a reflecting effect. Now you don't want to take this to like extremes, because things will look really weird. Put it in places where it stands out, but don't make every single wall the way that these things are. If you'll notice that these walls are dark enough that it doesn't really matter, and these pillars stand out, so it makes a very effective display here. So here you'll notice that there's essentially an entire reflection of basically this weird ceiling decoration. So, you know, you have your pillars, and basically the technique is to go in-game, actually go in-game where this texture is to be displayed. Look up in a manner that provides a very symmetrical and proper resolution and proper dimensions for a reflective texture. You take a screenshot of it, okay, and then you import it into Unreal. Now let me remember what this is. Hub Effects Pond 2. Now here's the trick. It's actually that there's two different things here. This one is and there's multiple textures. So this is from the same texture pack. So you can see that this is actually just another bump texture. You do the same technique, make it into a bump texture. There will be an offset quite often because it's distortion that provides this kind of thing. So you can just adjust that with panning. Then you can superimpose a water texture on this, and the result is a pretty convincing reflection. Now obviously there are some things to make note of. Obviously the actors cannot reflect, you know, in the texture. There have been tricks done, like in Zenith, where basically there's a mirror surface which provides the reflectivity, the actual reflection of any actor that goes over this visible area. You'll want to make these kinds of textures or these surfaces very close to each other. In fact, even probably preferably 0.5 units in distance. This is a 1 unit distance, and you can see that there's a little clipping there that maybe